Welcome to Health Reboot. It's our 7th of 8 nights in a row of a life-changing, transformational seminar to give you the resources to put health power back into your hands. Thank you for each one of you who is here live at the Reynolds Community Center in Pine Bluff. This is a big weekend in Pine Bluff, and I'm grateful that you've chosen to put your health first and prioritize it. I think that's a very wise decision. And as always, I want you to work closely with your physician or healthcare provider if you're making changes for the first time and you're on blood thinner medicine or blood pressure medicine, or especially if you're on insulin. These changes that you're making to adopt a healthier diet and earlier sleep times and more exercise can really work rapidly to make you need less medication so that your blood pressure doesn't go too low, or your blood doesn't become too thin, or the blood sugar doesn't go too low. So, just reminding you that there's no treatment relationship being established here. We're just providing information, but very happy to do it. And we're going to talk about all the things besides diet that relate to anxiety and depression. Exercise is so important to anxiety and depression that if it were a pill, it would be the world's best seller. There's nothing like exercise and a plant-based diet. It's been the most successful thing ever in the history of the world to reverse depression and anxiety, and we'll examine the evidence for that extraordinary claim as we go along. Plant-based diets beat depression. I don't usually say this right up front. It's the famous Geico study, but I just had to. I couldn't wait. I had to bring this to you first because it's so exciting to me. It was published in 2013 in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition by Katcher and colleagues. And you know Geico, they have a gecko as their mascot for their ads for car insurance. They have 10 workplaces scattered across the country, or they did in 2013. And at Geico, the employees agreed to be part of either the control group, who were given no dietary advice, or the experimental group. The employees who were targeted were the overweight employees with diabetes type 2. And those in the experimental group agreed to go on a plant-based diet for 5 months, a whole food plant-based diet with no oil. They were going to make their own food, and there was not to be any portion control, no calorie counting, no carb tracking. They were specifically told, do not change your exercise habits. If you're not an exerciser, don't start. If you are already an exerciser, don't change the level of it. Just keep it the same that you always have been. So we can study the effects of diet. Meals were not provided by the researchers, but the Geico Cafe started giving a few entrees that were plant-based, like veggie minestrone soup and veggie burritos. And the control group, again, they received no dietary advice. So, after 5 months of the study, how well do you think it succeeded? Well, it was a resounding success. Their weight dropped, their blood sugars came down, cholesterol levels came down. But what was really, really remarkable was the improvement in emotional states. Their moods greatly improved. Depression went down. Anxiety was reversed. They were less fatigued. They had a greater sense of well-being. These are the things that the employees reported. They put them in writing how they were feeling at the end of this study. And their daily overall functioning was just more efficient, energetic, productive. This was a landmark study, and it was prospective, which is a really good way to do science. Take away certain things from the diet, see what happens. I like that kind of science. And the conclusion was eat plants, because plant-based eaters in this study at Geico felt better. And we'd like to talk about the many resources that are available to help people achieve their very best health. Some of the biggest sellers in the whole pharmaceutical industry are the antidepressants, the anxiety medications. There's a lot of money flowing into the pharmacies from these type of drugs. But do they work? The studies show that actually antidepressants, although they can be very helpful for the seriously depressed who are just determined this week to end their life, they can be helpful for them, really in the long term, although you can get a short-term increase in your level of the feel-good chemicals in your brain, the serotonins and dopamines and those kinds of feel-good chemicals, the actual study results over the last decade have shown that some of the antidepressants actually deplete your brain nerves of the very neurotransmitters that are supposed to make you feel better. And they're supposed to be preventing the reuptake of these neurotransmitters so that you can inhibit the breakdown of them, the little vacuum cleaners that reabsorb them. And yet they're actually depleting the neurons. And so that's why so many people who go to wonderful live-in plant-based seminars such as the Weimar Institute, which runs a depression recovery program, so many of those people have already been on 4 different drugs because you have to keep upping the doses to get the person to stay out of depression or anxiety. And after a while, the medicines don't work. And the success at the Weimar Institute for depression recovery is a 98% success rate on a plant-based diet with cognitive behavioral therapy. That's remarkable. In fact, it's not duplicated by anyone anywhere else in the world. It's incredible. I just love that kind of hope to be able to offer people. My own favorite antidepressant is beans, greens, squash, and yams for breakfast. It's the Start Smart system that Sean and I trademarked to help people to understand why I have chosen to eat beans and veggies for breakfast. I try to eat them before 8 a.m. if I can, and I try to make breakfast the biggest meal of the day, because in 2008, Hirsch published an Israeli study showing that the biggest meal of the day should be breakfast for best health. His results echoed a study by Jakubowicz in 2013 that was published in Obesity Journal, showing that the biggest meal of the day for best health should be breakfast. And so, this is a picture of my breakfast plate, and we call it the Start Smart system. It's a way of eating trademarked to help you to understand that beans is a category, meaning split peas and lentils. Greens could be cooked or raw. Squash represents all the other veggies that are not green, and yams represents the tubers or the root vegetables like potatoes and sweet potatoes and yucca and other starchy vegetables, because starch is what fuels our energy throughout the day. These categories of food got me back to the same weight and energy levels I enjoyed in high school, and that's the reason that our team for Health Reboot is here tonight, because we want the same for you. So, some of the simple suggestions before I get into more of the nitty-gritty of how the plant-based diet reverses anxiety and depression. 50% of the day's calories, I try to get them at breakfast, and 20% at lunch. And the evening meal should be light and early. If people avoid all alcohol and marijuana, they're going to have less problems with depression and anxiety down the road, no matter how much short-term relief these chemicals appear to give people. If we eliminate caffeine, we're actually going to have less depression and less anxiety, according to the long-term studies, whether the caffeine is in coffee, tea, soda, chocolate, energy drinks, cocoa, or cacao. So, our goal should be daily stretching and exercise, avoiding all animal foods, being in bed by 10 p.m., and focusing on fiber. Beans are very high in fiber, so are lentils. The fruits and veggies, that's where the fiber is. There's no fiber in animal products. We should eliminate oil because it's inflammatory to the brain, and try to eat a diet with less than 20% of the calories from fat. Sleep is the unsung hero of mental health. If we can get into bed before 10 p.m. so that we can get to sleep and get 2 hours of sleep before midnight, that's going to be worth 4 hours of sleep after midnight when it comes to reversing depression and anxiety. And so, read ingredient labels. Plan ahead to bring plant-based food along with you. Clean up your environment. As Chef AJ says, if it's in the house, it's in the mouth. So try to get some of those high-calorie, junk food, sugar-laden things out of the house. You'll have more success when you're feeling depressed or anxious, because your body's going to be calling out for those things. Because foods that are high in calorie concentration, they give us a hit, a lift in our rise in our levels of dopamine and serotonin, and we feel temporarily better. Surely everyone knows how tempting it is to pig out with the cookies when we're feeling discouraged. So, let's talk about some of the biochemistry of how the plant-based diet really helps make people feel better. Monoamines are the feel-good neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And the monoamine oxidase is a compound found in the body that breaks down the excessive amounts of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Well, boo for that. We don't want our feel-good chemicals to be broken down, do we? And yet, to have too many of them, that wouldn't be good either. But is there a way that we can safely dampen down the level of monoamine oxidase without taking monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which are very strong pharmaceuticals with some serious side effects under certain conditions? But are there foods that could do it naturally and safely? Yes, many plant foods contain phytonutrients. Phyto is a Greek prefix meaning plant. And these phytonutrients appear to naturally inhibit the MAO, the monoamine oxidase. And these natural inhibitors are found in apples, berries, onions, grapes, and oregano. It's so remarkable to me the amazing properties of oregano. Oregano is powerful stuff, good stuff. Well, speaking of good stuff, serotonin is our feel-good monoamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter stored in the body's pleasure center. How can we boost our levels of the feel-good neurotransmitters? How to make more of it. Tryptophan is a precursor, an amino acid precursor of serotonin. Are there certain kinds of foods that will help tryptophan cross the blood-brain barrier and make it into the brain to convert into serotonin? You see, the problem is foods contain smaller amounts of tryptophan compared to the other amino acids. Tryptophan is one of the lower in amount, and so it can't really compete very well because it's so scarce in its quantity. And all the amino acids are competing to get into the brain through the blood-brain barrier, which it acts like a gate. So how can little tryptophan win the race when it's outnumbered by all the other amino acids? Here's how we do it. Let's put it to the test. A high-protein meal caused tryptophan levels in the brain to go down. High-carbohydrate meals cause tryptophan levels in the brain to go up. Now, many people after Thanksgiving dinner start feeling sluggish, and they say, oh, must have been the tryptophan in the turkey. But actually, it's all the high fat that makes you feel sluggish because it makes your blood kind of thick and sluggish too. So it's not the turkey that increases brain levels of tryptophan, thus making more serotonin. High carbohydrate meals cause serotonin levels in the brain to go up. This was published by Wertzman at MIT. So how did that work? Eating a meal rich in carbohydrate boosts insulin levels. So what does insulin do? Remember that insulin is a hormone that is like a key that opens muscles' doors. And it opens muscles' doors not just to the glucose, but to the amino acids. And the amino acids are now getting sucked up by the muscles for fuel. So when we eat a carbohydrate-rich meal and insulin levels go up, the amino acids go away from the blood-brain barrier because they're getting vacuumed up by the muscles. With the other amino acids used up by the muscles for fuel, little tryptophan becomes first in line to cross the blood-brain barrier. Carbohydrate-rich meals boost brain levels of tryptophan, and that's how they increase the feel-good levels of serotonin. Serotonin is the feel-good chemical. Animal protein meals make you feel less happy because you've got less serotonin. Plant protein meals make you feel more happy, and carbohydrates are the ones that boost serotonin levels. In fact, the brain's only fuel is a carbohydrate, glucose, and it's true, greens blunt the blues. What else was in the diets of the plant-based eaters that reduced depression? Veggies. The more veggies, the less depression. This amazing study showed that you can cut the odds of developing depression by as much as 62% by eating more veggies. It was published in Nutritional Neuroscience, And it was a journal review concluding, quote, eating lots of fruits and veggies may present actually they said vegetables, but I didn't have room on the slide. Eating lots of fruits and vegetables may present a non-invasive, natural, and inexpensive therapeutic means to support a healthy brain. But you can't get the goodies that you get from the vegetables in a pill or a powder. It's not the supplemental antioxidants that make so much of a difference. According to this study published in 2012 in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics by Payne and colleagues, fruit, vegetable, and antioxidant intakes are lower in adults with depression. Depressed people ate less fruits and vegetables, but the supplements studied in this study didn't help when it came to reversing depression. Not from folic acid. You see, people who eat folate-rich foods have less depression because folate is found in plants. Leafy greens are rich in folates. Low folate status is associated with impaired cognitive function, that's brain power, and dementia, that's memory loss, in the Sacramento area Latino study on aging, published in 2005 in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They studied cognitive function, so how well your brain works, and dementia, how much memory power you have in elderly Latinos. And these associations with less fruits and veggies showed that they had worse brain function the less fruits and veggies they ate, even if they were getting folic acid in supplements. You see, folic acid comes in a pill. It's made from a pharmaceutical plant or a laboratory plant, that kind of a plant. There's two kinds of plants, the kind of plant that's like a warehouse and the kind of plant that grows in the ground. And folic acid, no matter what they say, that's the pharmaceutical kind. Folate is the kind found in the food. If you get it in the food, it's great for you. If you get it in a pill, it increases the risk of prostate cancer or breast cancer by more than 150%. Now you know that obstetricians often are prescribing folic acid pills for pregnant ladies. What they should be doing instead is asking ladies to eat leafy greens at 2 different meals a day, because if the ladies did that and they got their folate in the leafy greens, we wouldn't have so much spina bifida. Do supplements work? Well, no, they don't prevent disease. In the Journal of Affective Disorders, which is mental disorders like depression and anxiety, Sharpley and his colleagues published in 2014 that neither supplement powders or pills have been proven to prevent depression, anxiety, any of the neurologic diseases. Supplements don't work. This was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial, and that's really good, rigorous science. So, do foods affect mood? According to this study, that's what they were looking for in 2010, published in the Nutrition Journal by Dr. Biesold. And vegetarian diets were found to be associated with healthy mood states. It was a cross-sectional study of Seventh-day Adventist adults. Vegetarians had significantly less negative emotion, anger, depression, than omnivores. Omni means everything. So the people who eat, the fish and the chicken, and hey, wait a minute though, fish. I thought that they were really high in omega-3s and that was supposed to be good for your brain. Well, omega-3s are good for your brain. But even the people who are eating a pesco-vegetarian diet, no other animal protein in the diet except fish, they did not do as well on the depression scores as the vegetarians. And participants with low intakes of arachidonic acid had better mood. What is arachidonic acid? I'm happy you asked. Arachidonic acid is a chemical inside our body. It's a long-chain omega-6 fatty acid that causes brain inflammation, and not just the brain. Other parts of the body get inflamed too, like the joints and the circulation. The primary source of arachidonic acid in the American diet is chicken. Chicken, but eggs too, meat and fish. Now, interestingly enough, dairy does not have arachidonic acid. The chicken and the eggs contribute more than all other sources combined. Just eating one egg can significantly raise arachidonic acid blood levels. Omnivores who eat meat, dairy, eggs, they consume 9 times more arachidonic acid than those eating plant-based diets. And that's why omnivores have so much more inflammation, including the inflammation in their brain that causes depression and anxiety. Arachidonic acid was studied in an interventional study. Now, this kind of a study is the gold standard in nutritional research. You gather together the subjects, change their diets, and see what happens. So the men and women were gathered who ate meat at least once per day, and the researchers took away their eggs, their chicken, their other meats, and within 2 weeks, their mood improved. That's pretty remarkable in such a short time. This was published in the journal Nutrition in 2012, again by Dr. Bezold. Oil promotes inflammation. Oil is not a whole food. It's a fat removed from its fiber. And plant-based oils, that's what most of the oils are, is plant-based. Corn oil, sunflower oil, olive oil, they raise levels of arachidonic acid, the omega-6 fatty acid. Omega-6 is inflammatory, omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. But the inflammation caused by vegetable oils causes not only arthritis, cataracts, but also brain inflammation, anxiety, and depression. This was corroborated over and over. Studies were published as far back as 1994, 1999, and again in 2012. So, for better moods, what we need is balanced levels of testosterone, which makes a man feel a sense of well-being. When a man has low testosterone, it's much more easy for him to get depressed. And progesterone, the happiness hormone of the woman. And if we understand that over-estrogenizing ourselves will suppress both testosterone and progesterone, then we understand why we want to be so careful not to eat the foods that cause excess levels of estrogen. A whole food plant-based diet has fiber. Remember that fiber is the estrogen sponge, and so the better the hormone balance. Progesterone is the happy hormone, and women need enough progesterone to keep the periods from being too heavy, too frequent, and too long in duration. The fiber in foods such as beans, veggies, whole grains prevents estrogen from suppressing progesterone and testosterone. So balanced levels of progesterone and testosterone promote better moods. And here you see, I know I showed this earlier in the week, how similar the cholesterol and the estrogen, the testosterone and progesterone, how similar they all look. They're all sterol compounds. You can see their backbone chain of carbon rings joined together. And the place where we get cholesterol is in eggs, dairy, and fish. What cholesterol does is raises the estrogen, and that suppresses the lower two, the testosterone and the progesterone, contributing to more depression and anxiety. This is a really important thing when it comes to quality of life. The quality of life is greatly affected by people who have anger out of control. Now, there are some women who are in prison for murder, and they are much more likely to have committed that crime in a certain part of the month. Researchers asked the women who were committed to prison for murder, when was it in your monthly cycle that you committed or that you were alleged to have committed the crime? And the majority of women admitted that it was within 3 days of starting their period. This is a quality of life issue. And if women eat things like dairy and eggs, which excessively raise levels of estrogen, it could contribute to disorders of mood that can make a big impact in her future. Now, PMS is premenstrual syndrome, and PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Dr. Miller published in 2010 that near the end of the monthly cycle, estrogen levels are their monthly highest in the non-pregnant state. But if you have excessive levels of estrogen, you're much more at risk for PMS and PMDD. But fiber prevents the PMDD symptoms, not just the anxiety and depression that can be common right before the menstrual cycle starts, but also the pelvic pain. So the researchers wanted to know. It was published in the journal Cancer by Dr. Braga in 1999. Was the increased fiber responsible for the reduced pain in the pelvis? Well, it was not only the increased fiber, it was the lower fat. And fiber is known to sweep excess estrogen out of our system, preventing it from recirculating in the bloodstream. The good news is vegans suffer less monthly distress. They also suffer less memory loss. And everybody's interested in keeping their brain sharp as they age. This wonderful cookbook does not have pictures, but it's still worth the read. This was written by Dr. Neil Barnard of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He's a very high-powered physician in Washington, D.C., who has written many wonderful books, such as Foods That Fight Pain and The Cancer Survivor's Guide. And he is a person who doesn't eat meat, dairy, eggs, or oil because he's a smart guy and he knows how much it does for your health when you eat a diet like that. But now let's talk about one of my very favorite studies of all. This area of research, depression and anxiety, we don't have as much data as we do for plant-based diets' effects on cancer and blood pressure and diabetes. But this study was published in 2017 by Dr. Jacka and colleagues in the BMC Medicine Journal. It was a 12-week study, and it talked about a healthy diet improving mood. It was a very rigorous study. It was a randomized controlled trial of dietary improvement for adults with major depression. It was called the SMILES trial. And they were fed 6 servings of vegetables, 5 servings of whole grains, 3 servings of fruit. This was a study in which they measured depression scores using the Montgomery-Åsberg Depression Rating Scale. So, what happened? 32% of the people had depression scores so much improved that they were no longer depressed. They didn't qualify as a depressed patient anymore. In the unhealthy diet group, of course, they had a controlled group who did not go on the plant-based diet. There was only a 4-point improvement, and only 8% of them achieved remission from their depression and anxiety. This was a major study helping the public to see that it's important to eat well, both from a prevention and a treatment point of view, according to Professor Jacka. Does overeating cause depression? Actually, it can. The studies show that the effects of calorie restriction does good things for depression and anxiety. The potential mechanisms are that when you restrict calories in the short term, such as eating a low-fat plant-based diet, and you exercise moderately, you've got great antidepressant effects through activating the neuroendocrine hormones, and that's the serotonin, the dopamine, and the norepinephrine. This was published in the journal Current Neuropharmacology by Chinese researchers in 2015. However, a good thing can be overdone. You don't want to do water-only fasting for, extended periods of time or severe dietary restriction, because you need to feed your gut microbiome. The gut microbiome refers to the good bacteria that live inside our intestine. It's been called the second brain. Did you know that those gut bacteria can digest the fiber that we cannot digest? That's their food. Only plants have fiber, and the gut bacteria can make feel-good chemicals that actually reverse depression and anxiety, and that's why it's been called the second brain. Let's talk about causes for depression. This material comes from Dr. Neil Nedley. I am indebted to this world-famous researcher because he's done groundbreaking work on plant-based diets, cognitive behavioral therapy, and depression, combining them all together in an unprecedented program that has a 98% success rate in reversing depression and anxiety. And long-term, he follows up with people, and they're actually even less depressed after a whole year on it, and at the second year, even feeling better. But let's talk about his top 10 hit categories. What's being hit? Our brain. And our brain is where the depression and anxiety is manifested in our thoughts, and there are 2 of these 10 hit categories that we can't do anything about. Our genetics. We can't choose the family that we're born in, and some of us have family members with depression, and we can't do anything about our development, the way that we were raised, because that can have a significant effect on whether or not we become depressed or anxious later in life. However, the good news is that even though you may have a strike against you genetically and the way you were raised, unless 4 of the 10 hit categories are active, it's much less likely that you'll become depressed. You don't have to become depressed. However, the other 8 are within our control, and they are lifestyle. Do you exercise? Circadian rhythm. Do you get to bed before 10 p.m.? Nutrition. Do you eat a plant-based diet rich in whole grains, leafy greens, and starchy root vegetables like sweet potatoes? Do you take in toxins such as alcohol, caffeine, or the mercury found in fish? It's really, really impossible to get all the mercury out of the fish. And mercury is so highly correlated with brain deterioration that researchers everywhere, if they want to study the effects of mercury, they're studying fish. Now there's one company who makes a drug called Novasa, and they have purified fish oil 90% of the way. But you can't get all the mercury out of the fish oil. It's never a good idea to take fish oil supplements. They may make your numbers look temporarily better, but the mercury in the fish actually causes depression and anxiety. And this is in spite of the fact that fish oil is high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are supposed to, boost brain function and decrease anxiety and depression. Addictions such as nicotine, these are causes of depression. And then there's medical reasons like hepatitis C and stroke. And of course there's social reasons, the death of a spouse, the death of a child, divorce. All these lack of social support things can put you at risk for depression. You'll notice though that my slide says 10 hit categories, but I've only listed 9. What is the 10th one? Those are the hits to the frontal lobe, the way we think. The frontal lobe is the seat of our morality, our judgment, it's our analyzer, it's our willpower. And so there it is in the front of the brain, and our species, the human species, has more of its brain dedicated to the frontal lobe than any other species. It is the frontal lobe of the human being that sets us apart from every other species. We are different. Yes, we're in the animal kingdom, but we're different than the other animals. Because you see, when our babies are born, they don't get up within hours and run beside the mother like a baby deer, or a calf toddling after the mother. Why? Because it takes a long time to myelinate or get a fatty coating on the nerves of the brain. It takes years before the infant is ready to talk and do things that an adult could do. So what are the hits to the frontal lobe? The hits could be the things that we say to ourselves, such as focusing on hopelessness or focusing on being a victim, helplessness, jumping to conclusions. These are all cognitive distortions. Overwhelming yourself. I am struggling with that one this week, feeling a little overwhelmed with these lectures, but I am so grateful that you have come and made it worth it. Self-labeling, undervaluing the rewards, perfectionism, fear of failure, like catastrophizing, fear of success, fear of disapproval or criticism, and coercion and resentment, and low frustration tolerance. There are things that we can tell ourselves that will dispel the cognitive distortions. We can replace them with the truth. Dr. Nedley, in his wonderful depression recovery program at the Weimar Institute, is a world-famous researcher who's dedicated his life to helping the difficult-to-diagnose patient and the depressed patient to understand the power of a plant-based diet and cognitive behavioral therapy. He's board certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine, and he has 35 years of experience, and he's known across the world. He's lectured in many different countries, been on television in many different countries, and he's got that 98% success rate. His first book was Depression, The Way Out, and it's a well-researched book. I have it, and I highly recommend that if you suffer depression or anxiety that you get this book. But if you don't suffer depression or anxiety, you would really also benefit by getting his second book, The Lost Art of Thinking. Dr. Nedley regularly trains physicians from around the world to help increase emotional intelligence. We call it EQ as opposed to IQ. And emotional intelligence is what determines, even more than our wealth or our educational level, our success in life. Here's a picture of the Weimar Institute, and this fascinating place has a college and a high school and a wonderful cafeteria and a medical clinic and the depression recovery program. They also do fantastic work in reversing diabetes. It's in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas of California, Northern California, and if any of you have any health challenges and you want to go to a live-in program, I highly recommend the Weimar Health Institute. It will be life-changing and it will change you for the better. This is Dr. Neil Barnard. He wrote a book called Breaking the Food Seduction, and this is where I learned to eat beans for breakfast because beans have resistant starch. Everyone knows beans are somewhat harder to digest than other foods, and this difficulty in digestion makes them keep your blood sugar levels stable so that your blood sugar levels are not dropping, which could cause your moods to fall. And that's why I eat beans and veggies for breakfast, to stabilize blood sugars and boost my level of stimulant neurotransmitters due to the protein in the vegetables. It's a great start to the day, a breakfast of champions. So why do we do what we do? Well, we do it to feel better. We tell ourselves things like, when we're reaching for unhealthy substances, when we're making unhealthy behavior choices, we justify it by saying, but this relaxes me. Oh, but I need this to give me energy. Oh, but I just can't sleep without this. Or we say, I just want to feel better now. What causes our bad feelings? Thoughts and beliefs create feelings, out of which flows behavior. This is the essence of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's actually our own thoughts and beliefs that contribute to those lousy feelings. I'm not saying that that's the only thing. There are activating events, such as an earthquake happening, or a divorce, or a sudden diagnosis of a new disease, that trigger thoughts and beliefs. But we don't have to go immediately from activating event to a destructive behavior. Now, if this room started shaking violently and we thought it was an earthquake, we might take immediate action. Run out the door, or hide under the chair or table or something, because the earthquake is the activating event and hiding under the table is the behavior. But in between the activating event and the behavior, there's the thoughts and the beliefs and the feelings. We can prevent bad feelings if we can control the thoughts and replace the cognitive distortions with truth. So there is hope for better moods and better behavioral choices. If we use truth to guide the thoughts and beliefs, we can dispel the cognitive distortions, get the better feelings, and create the better behaviors. By using truth to guide our thoughts and beliefs, we can prevent the feelings that make us choose the self-destructive behaviors, even if we've got activating events that are heavy burdens in our life. Remember that oil is 100% of its calories from fat, and the brain's only fuel is carbohydrate, glucose. So if people are trying to tell you that coconut oil is needed to prevent Alzheimer's, I want to quote the Alzheimer's Association, which they came right out and said, quote, "There is no scientific evidence that coconut oil helps with Alzheimer's." But those selling coconut oil took a page straight out of the beef industry playbook, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Beef contains a saturated fat called stearic acid. Unlike the cholesterol-elevating saturated fats palmitic, myristic, and lauric acid, stearic acid's natural effect on blood cholesterol is not that bad. But beef has palmitic and myristic, which does raise the level. And that's like Coca-Cola saying they know for a fact that soda doesn't make you gain weight because it contains water, and water has a neutral effect on weight gain. You see, they're just downplaying the risks and misleading you. So let's talk about replacing cognitive distortions with truth by asking Pastor Michael Wolford to come up. Pastor Michael Wolford serves the Pine Bluff community as a Bible-believing Christian. Pastor Wolford, what does the Bible compare a good emotional attitude to?
Well, here is a beautiful promise. Some people have even put this into a cheerful song. But it says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Quite a scripture. A merry heart is a happy heart. A merry heart is a glad heart, a joyful heart, and a cheerful spirit. But a lot of people are sad. Have you ever been sad? Oh yeah. Have you ever been feeling hopeless and had feelings of guiltiness or guilt? Well, God has a mighty powerful solution. And we're still not to the scripture tonight that we're really going to focus on it, but I'm going to read this preview scripture again. What is God's solution to our depression, to our feelings of guilt, our feelings of hopelessness, our discouragement? Well, here we have it. In Psalm 103, it says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities." How do you like that? Forgives all your sins, all your wrong choices, all your wrong habits, all your faults. And in that forgiveness, there's power to break those habits and change those patterns of defeat. Who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies. Think about this. There's a greatness in God's mercy, and there is a deepness in his forgiveness, and there is a power in his pardon that gives us hope. It lifts the burden of guilt. It breaks the cycle of addictions and bad habits and sin. We're freed to walk in new habits. And a hopeful heart and a forgiven heart and a pardoned heart is a merry heart. And God says, a merry heart does good like a medicine.
Thank you, Pastor Wolford. Appreciate that. I really appreciate the encouragement that God wants to empower us to focus on him so that as we do study his word, we can learn how our choices may help us feel better, not just physically, but emotionally. Now, the text that he read about a broken spirit dries the bones, let's talk about dried bones. Let's talk about osteoporosis. Did you know that depression is linked with osteoporosis and may cause osteoporosis? Studies show that osteoporosis is more common in depressed people. Both osteoporosis and depression are lifestyle diseases, which is not to put guilt on anyone, but to give you hope that lifestyle changes can make a big difference in these diseases. And you might think, well, there's no reversing osteoporosis, but actually in my patients, there are people who have reversed osteoporosis and gone back to osteopenia, which is the step right before osteoporosis. And some have actually gotten back normal bone density. Let's talk about some of the causes of osteoporosis so that you can understand what my patients did to reverse those causes. Osteoporosis is mainly a disease that is promoted by 5 factors: tobacco, alcohol, caffeine, salt in the diet, and animal protein. Now, how does that work? Animal protein is made of amino acids, and plant proteins are made of amino acids. But in the animal proteins, the amino acids are more likely to contain sulfur, creating an effect of sulfuric acid in the body. This tends to drop the pH a little lower, and that pH, it is an acid. When low pH is an acid, and the kidney has to flush out that acid. When it does, out goes calcium with it. And the urine of people who have animal protein in their diet has more calcium in it, and they're urinating away their bone strength. So if you eat a plant-based diet, the amino acids are less likely to have as much sulfur, so it's a more alkaline environment, and you don't urinate away your calcium as much. What can we do to prevent or reverse osteoporosis? We need daily weight-bearing exercise, and not just for the legs, but for the arms. So carrying weights and hiking with a backpack on your back. These are very good things. We need daily sunshine for the vitamin D. And we need to avoid the causes listed on the previous page. Dan Bittner wrote a book called Blue Zones, where people tend to live much longer than in other areas of the world, many of them living to reach age 100. One essential factor that they had in common was social support, which enhances longer life and better health. The social support that we're interested in offering you is, that's why we started our support groups on Monday night and Tuesday night, and they start this coming Monday night for the plant-based tasting, and Tuesday night for the Bible study for Hope for Behavior Change. Because there's two big hurdles when you start adopting these lifestyle changes that we're advocating this week. When you become a plant-based eater, you need skills in time management, and you need to understand that the social aspect is going to be tougher. Sometimes when you eat a plant-based diet, you can feel all alone because the world is not set up to provide you with food out there, with food that you can buy, unless you're at a grocery store. But at a restaurant, at a wedding reception, at Thanksgiving dinner at the relative's house, they may not provide you the kind of food that you need, which is why I advise you to bring food with you wherever you go. Being different can foster risk for social rejection. That may cause anxiety and depression. Loved ones may be angry that we don't meet their expectations anymore. We may feel anxious about, where am I going to find the time to learn new recipes? It's a learning curve. How am I going to manage my time to be able to prepare food to bring with me wherever I go? That's what the support groups are on Monday and Tuesday night. So on Monday nights, we're going to talk about how I cook in my busy life to avoid or reverse autoimmune diseases, joint pains, osteoporosis and osteopenia, high blood pressure, insomnia, and of course, overweight. Can support help? Yes. At these support groups, you can talk to us one-on-one. It's more of a round table. It's more informal. You can find like-minded friends. You can learn supporting science and give your taste buds time to neuroadapt. You can also taste the new recipes, which can keep you encouraged. And you can find potential mates. It's harder to find a mate if you're looking for one who now is into the healthy changes that you might be making. And so that's why supper clubs are springing up all over the country for plant-based eaters. What we're offering is not a supper club, but at least you get to taste it. And on Tuesday night, we've got Bible-based hope. How people can beat food cravings through help from the Bible, kick alcohol, drugs, or nicotine, and see answers behind what's going on in the world. There's spiritual power for victory in real life when we study the Bible together. And remember, we'll be giving away at the Tuesday night Bible study group some of my videos to give you resources. Yes, they're available for rent at or sale as a streaming video at veggievore.com. But if you come in person to the Tuesday night support group, you can get one for free. And we want you to be able to preserve your vitality, enhance your athletic performance, and get all your questions answered. That's what we're going to be doing tomorrow night as we talk about our very last subject of this week. And so when you get home tonight, click your website, enter in your questions, and for those of you here in person, you're welcome to talk to me, Dr. Ferdinand Samuel, and Pastor Wolford as we exit. And tomorrow night, pain and autoimmune disorders, and we're going to be answering some of the questions that people have been submitting this week. And on Monday, tasty cooking tips, and Tuesday, hope for Bible study power. So come tomorrow night, Saturday, October 16, when we'll talk about pain and autoimmune diseases and some of your questions. Again, thank you to all the people who have taught me all the wonderful things that I know about reversing my diseases and becoming free of asthma. Bring your friends and family. If they're suffering, show them where the hope can be found. Thank you again for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow night.